Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're having an awesome day. I'm finally doing my book review on Gulliver's Travels by Jonathan Swift. It's taken me so long to read this book. I started reading it in mid-October and it's almost mid-December, so it's almost taken me 2 months. I've just been really busy. I haven't had a lot of time to read, but today I finally finished it. Thank God. There's so many other books I want to start reading. I'm so happy I'm finally done this book. So this book was written in the 1700s, and it's about a man named Gulliver, and he goes on various different expeditions and travels around the world. He goes to different islands and discovers these different civilizations. He kind of learns their different ways of living and how they govern and how they talk and how they live and how they interact and what their goals and what their who they are as people and how different they are from where Gulliver comes from. Gulliver comes from Europe. And so the book is divided into, I believe, 4 parts. Let me just double check that. I have Wikipedia open right now. I mean, this is, in my opinion, it was a bit of a difficult book to read. It's not the easiest read, to be honest. I will admit that it's probably, I imagine, a fairly dry book for many people. If you were to read this, I imagine a lot of people would think it's boring. It is traditionally a children's novel, but I imagine a lot of children today would not enjoy this novel by any means. The only part they would probably enjoy is the first part where Gulliver travels to Lilliput. Lilliput. I think that's how you say it. He travels to an island that is filled with a civilization of little people. And that is the most notable part of Gulliver's Travels. If you type Gulliver's Travels into Google Images, Lilliput, part one of this novel, is what comes up. Essentially, that part where Gulliver is kind of tied to the ground, and there's a whole bunch of little people around him. That's kind of the most iconic scene in Gulliver's Travels. So I feel like kids in general would be more receptive to that part, but all the others, I can't see children enjoying this novel. Even teenagers, I imagine quite a few teenagers, I'll even say 9 out of 10 teenagers would find this book very dry and boring. I found it dry sometimes, occasionally. When Gulliver visits these different civilizations, he learns about their government. There's lots of talk about government and how they govern, about morals and what's good, what's bad morally, what makes a good person, what makes a bad person, philosophical discussions and such about Earth and the planet and just what it is to be a man and such. And I imagine a lot of people would find that dry and boring. But anyway, there are 4 parts: part one, part two, part three, and part four. Part one, like I said, is the voyage to Lilliput, and then part two is another voyage he takes to Brobdingnog. Brobdingnog, I think that's how you say it. And then part three, a voyage to Laputa, Balneabary, Balnebarby, Balnebarby, Lugnog, Glubdubdrib, and Japan. And in part four, a voyage to the land of the Houyhnhnms, which are a civilization of horses, which I found a very interesting part of the story. But anyway, I'll say probably my favorite part is probably obviously Lilliput. Part one is probably my favorite. Obviously, it's the most iconic part to Gulliver's Travels, the world of little people. But all the subsequent adventures that he took after that, I found quite interesting. There's a part where there is a floating city in the sky as well. Really interesting. Just each place he goes to is so different and so weird. I mean, this is typically, it's a little bit of a science fiction fantasy novel. So there's so many weird characters and creatures and just the way these people live and these creatures, the way they kind of conduct themselves and the way they talk. I mean, they're so vast and different, so weird, so crazy, so just strange in so many ways. I found many parts of this book very strange. Again, it's a fantasy novel, it's science fiction, it's not necessarily real by any means. Um, And yeah, I found it very fascinating. I found it difficult to read. Obviously, this book was written in the 1700s. There were a lot of times where I had to pull out a thesaurus or a dictionary just to kind of understand what he was saying. People wrote books differently back then. So there were many times where I had to kind of reread passages just to kind of get a grasp of what Jonathan Swift was trying to say. Yeah, so it was a little difficult to read in parts. There are still, to this day, parts that I don't really understand. Again, I'm not really well read when it comes to older works. I haven't read many books prior to the 20th century. This is pretty much the first one I think I've ever read, and it's from the 1700s. So read it at your own risk. It's not an easy read. I mean, if you are a well-read, educated person, then you will probably understand this book. But if you're not very well-read and you're not the greatest when it comes to reading, then this will probably be a bit of a difficult read. It was for me. I learned a lot, though. It was a fascinating read. Would I read it again? I don't know if I would read it again. Maybe in a few years. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know if I would. But I'm a little disappointed that there isn't a movie based on this book. There's like a weird animated movie I found on YouTube, but it doesn't really have anything to do with Gulliver's Travels. It has a little bit to do with it, but it was just really weird. And there's been like little mini TV series, and there was the Jack Black Gulliver's Travels movie, which wasn't. I haven't seen the trailer. I have no interest in watching the trailer or the movie, but it's I imagine like a little bit of a spoof off of this book. I mean, it has Jack Black. It's a comedy. I have no interest in watching that. I just wish one day there will be a genuine adaptation of this book. I really hope maybe like an 8-part series, on like HBO or something. I think it would be really fascinating. I'm just really surprised there hasn't been like a big budget adaptation of this book yet. I mean, it's so fascinating, it's so interesting. There's so many interesting characters, weird, scary, quirky characters. There's pirates, there's creatures, there's princesses, there's prince, there's kings, there's small people, there's big people. There's an island floating in the sky. There's talking horses and like creepy little people. I mean, it's such a fascinating book. I just really wish there would be, or I'm hoping there will be like a big budget movie or like 8-part TV series one day on this book. I feel like it really deserves it. So yeah, that's pretty much my review on the book. Again, I'm kind of looking at Wikipedia right now, just to help me with this review. Yeah, and I really did enjoy it. It took me a long time to read it. But yeah, I give it a solid 4 out of 5. And again, when I read it again, I don't know, but it was a good book. Read it at your own risk. So yeah, thanks for watching. If you've read this book before, let me know what you thought of it. Maybe give me some information, maybe some things I don't know about the book. It's very metaphorical. There's lots of allegories for how we live as a society, and the corruption of man around the world, and how naive Gulliver is in believing so many people. I mean, Gulliver is kind of a play on word of gullible. Gulliver is a very gullible man. You just read many different viewpoints on, societies and morals and how we live and the truth and lying and corruption. We just learn about these different perspectives from these different civilizations and how they live their lives, and it's really fascinating. Even some of it can be related to today and how we live as, a society, even though this was written like 300 years ago. Anyway, I'm rambling now. So thank you for watching this review, and again, let me know what you thought of it, and I will see you next time for my next book review. And I want to say that my next book review will be, 3 months from now, but I'm thinking it might be. Again, I'm busy, I don't have a lot of time to read, and the next book I'm reading is actually my winter reading challenge. I finished reading Gone with the Wind this summer. I read it in 2 months. Again, I had so much time on my hands, I was able to read it fairly fast. I really loved it. I thought it was a fantastic book. It's one of my favorite books of all time. And I had no intention of reading Scarlet, the sequel to Gone with the Wind by Alexandra Ripley. But my mom had it, and she decided to give it to me because she knew how much I love Gone with the Wind. So now I'm going to read it. So this is the next book I will be reading. It's fairly long. So hopefully it doesn't take me 3 months to read this. I'm gonna try and get it down to 2. So then I'll probably release the book review for this probably in maybe February. I'll aim for February because this is my winter reading challenge. And once March comes along, I'll be thinking about my spring reading challenge and summer reading challenge. There's so many books I want to read next year. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching this video, and I will see you next time.